Someone in power makes a decision, no explanation, no justification. Not even when people are clearly confused, clearly hurt, clearly owed a reason. And the strange part is, the silence doesn't make them look weak. It makes them look untouchable. If I had done that, I'd have to explain myself immediately. You've thought that watching someone powerful walk away from a decision without a single word of defense, and some part of you couldn't understand how they got away with it. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Explaining yourself isn't just communication. It's a signal, and the signal it sends is that your position depends on other people's approval to survive. In certain power dynamics, the moment you feel compelled to justify every decision, you may be signaling that your confidence depends on approval rather than conviction. Powerful people know this, even if they've never said it out loud, which is exactly why the ones who hold real power learn, often without meaning to, that silence protects something explanation gives away. Psychologists studying status and hierarchy call this the cost of justification. Every explanation you give is evidence you needed the other person's buy-in. Subordinates explain, equals negotiate. But the person at the top of a hierarchy doesn't need either because their position was never up for a vote in the first place. So, when someone in power stays silent after a decision that clearly affected you, they're not being cruel by accident. They're demonstrating, without saying a single word, that your reaction isn't a variable in their equation. This connects to something researchers call information asymmetry as a power display. In almost every human hierarchy, corporate, political, even within families, the person with more power reveals less, and the person with less power is expected to reveal more. Think about it. An employee explains why they were late. A CEO doesn't explain why they made a call that cost people their jobs. A parent doesn't always explain the rule. A partner with more emotional leverage in a relationship often explains the least, while the one with less power over-explains, over-apologizes, fills every silence with justification. The gap in explanation isn't incidental. It's often the clearest signal of where the actual power sits. But there's a deeper psychological layer here, and it's the one that should genuinely unsettle you. Explaining yourself requires exposing your reasoning, and reasoning can be picked apart, questioned, found wanting. The moment you explain a decision, you've handed the other person a target. They can say your logic was flawed, your priorities were wrong, your reasoning didn't hold up. Silence gives them nothing to attack. This is why the most consequential decisions in history, the ones made behind closed doors, in boardrooms, in wars, in institutions, were so rarely accompanied by full explanation, even when the people affected desperately deserved one. It was never really about privacy. It was about never handing anyone the material to dismantle the decision after the fact. There's also something psychologists refer to as status-confirming ambiguity. When someone powerful stays vague or silent, it forces everyone around them to fill in the blank, and people tend to fill blanks with more authority than was actually there. A vague answer from someone with power reads as strategic. The exact same vague answer from someone without power reads as evasive or incompetent. This isn't fair, and it isn't really about the person's honesty at all. It's about how much benefit of the doubt status buys you before anyone questions the silence in the first place. Powerful people, consciously or not, learn to use this asymmetry because ambiguity from the top gets interpreted as wisdom, and ambiguity from the bottom gets interpreted as a red flag. This is also why so many people mistake silence for confidence when it's frequently closer to calculation. A person doesn't need actual inner certainty to withhold explanation. They just need to understand that offering one costs them more than it protects them, which means the unbothered, composed silence you're reading as strength might not be strength at all. It might simply be someone who has learned, through repetition, that answering never made anything better for them and often made things worse. Here's what makes this genuinely dark rather than simply strategic. The less someone explains themselves, the less accountable they become. Not because they're right more often, but because there's nothing left on record to hold them to. Every explanation creates a thread someone else could pull. No explanation, no thread. Over time, the people who explain the least accumulate the most protection, regardless of whether their decisions were actually sound. Power doesn't just avoid explanation because it's confident. It avoids explanation because unexplained decisions are nearly impossible to unravel afterward. And this is the part almost nobody says out loud. The people who owe you the most explanation are usually the ones least likely to give it, precisely because they're the ones with the least incentive to. The debt only gets paid by people who still need something from you. Once someone no longer needs anything from you, the explanation simply stops arriving. Not out of malice necessarily, but because the entire cost-benefit calculation running underneath their silence has quietly changed. So the next time someone with power makes a decision that affects you and offers nothing back, no context, no accountability, no reason, understand what you're actually looking at. It's rarely confidence. It's rarely even indifference. It's a calculation made long before this moment that silence protects something words would only put at risk. How many explanations have you been owed by someone who simply decided you didn't need one? If this changed how you read the silence of the people in charge around you, subscribe to MindraftX, because power rarely announces itself. Most of the time, it just stops explaining.